On Skype from Beirut now, Rami Khouri is a senior fellow and professor at the American University. They're always nice to see you, Rami. ISIL defeated in a week is Donald Trump's claim. It's a pretty wild claim, in fact, because, well, can you, quote-unquote, defeat ISIL? I feel like we've had these conversations in the past with the likes of al-Qaeda.
The United States has shown over the last 17 years or 18 years or whatever it is since the 9/11 attacks that the United States doesn't quite understand what people like al-Qaeda and ISIL and others like them actually represent. There is a territorial dimension sometimes, and that is the easiest one to defeat, which the U.S. and many local militias in Arab and other countries defeated ISIL in northern Syria and Iraq. But the groups like these groups have been spreading all across the Middle East and further afield. For instance, West Africa now, the Sahel area, is a big growth area for al-Qaeda and ISIS. We've seen the Shabab in Somalia and other places. So the phenomenon that ISIL represents is not really well understood in the United States. Therefore, people like George Bush and Obama and Trump, and they all talk about, well, we defeated them militarily, now we can pull out. And that's proven to be false. So this is another moment where the United States shows its inability to understand the nature of the kinds of militarism and political activities and socio-religious, cultural, ethnic activities that take place in the Middle East, which the U.S. confronts mainly through military means.
Does it provide another almost opening for al-Qaeda or al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and the Maghreb, all these other groups there? I mean, does it give them impetus as well to know that, well, military is leaving, US military is leaving, they seem to think they've beaten all these groups, and that it creates a hole for them as well?
These groups and others who are involved in more traditional kind of military or political resistance against the US and other foreign powers, they all assume, and rather correctly, that the foreign power is going to leave one day, like they left Vietnam, like they left Afghanistan, like the British left India, like the French left Algeria. The foreign military power will eventually leave, and they just wait them out. That's one strategy that they use. The other strategies that these groups are using now is trying to embed themselves with local governance mechanisms in places like Yemen and Libya and other places where they can act more like a traditional role, a traditional group that helps societies protect themselves and develop themselves and meet basic services. So they're learning different techniques to use rather than the one that they used in the last decade or so, which is aggressive military, religious-based, action, and creating the so-called Islamic State. They have evolved, and they're continuing to evolve, and they will use the American withdrawal to continue that kind of evolution until the underlying issues that give life to these kinds of groups are dealt with by the governments and societies in the region primarily. And these are socioeconomic, political, developmental issues, rights, dignity, opportunity, that these governments almost totally have not provided sufficiently for their people, and therefore some extremist groups come to life, and some desperate people, in some cases millions of them, support these groups.
Rami Khouri, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Now, building on the story, Raheel has been taking a look at the impact of airstrikes in ISIL areas in Syria and Iraq. What have you found? And
elsewhere as well, Kamal. Okay. Well, there is a lot of information out there, but we have managed to collate some of it. Now, Tomas Rolbiecki from Syrian War Daily says, despite ISIL losing almost all its territory, the armed group is still able to launch attacks in some areas. And he shared this interactive map detailing ISIL activity in Iraq and Syria, and also extending to some other places like Nigeria, Egypt, and Afghanistan. Each dot you see here tells you when and what attack ISIL has claimed. Rolbiecki concludes there were 348 incidents, that being 12 a day last month alone, and slightly less than November last year. And Air Wars, a site that monitors conflict and their impact on civilians, has tracked and mapped 32,000 US coalition anti-ISIL air and artillery strikes from 2014 to 2018. The site says the coalition stopped saying where and when it dropped bombs back in December. So it's calling on Operation Inherent Resolve, as the military is known for, or the operation is known for, to be more transparent about its airstrikes. Now, Raqqa is in Syria, and it is considered to be the city to have suffered some of the worst destruction in recent times. The US-led coalition's military campaign to destroy ISIL has killed and injured thousands of people. Now, Air Wars and Amnesty International have been conducting field investigations since 2017 to look into those strikes.
We as Amnesty International must do everything now to pressure the 70 governments that constitute this coalition to take responsibility and seriously investigate what happened here in Raqqa. It is ironical that the US-led coalition was able to ensure that hundreds of ISIS fighters were able to leave with their arms and with impunity, while not being able to offer that same care to civilians who have suffered so greatly